welcome to episode, I don't know, 4, 3? Anyway, we're going to talk about ego today, and it just occurred to me that I'm probably wearing the same stuff I seem to always wear, but anyway. Now, the dictionary definition of ego, and I'm going to read it, ego is your source of personal identity, or your feeling of self-importance. Oh dear, what a massive subject. So ego, is it bad? Is it good? Ego can be really bad. I think we've seen over the last week, Liz Truss clearly has got a massive ego, a feeling of self-importance, and what she says has got to be correct. It's a massive, massive, massive negative. But on the other side of things, you know, ego can also, I don't think it gets a bit of a bad press, but I think ego is quite important. We need to have an awareness of ourselves. If we didn't have that awareness, why would we want to lose weight? Why would we do anything? Why would we, you know, get up in the morning almost? It's a case of we have to be driven. We have to have a feeling of self-importance or self-worth. It's when it gets carried away. So I think it's like all things. It's on a spectrum, isn't it? At the bottom end of that spectrum are the monks that probably walk around, the Buddhist monks that walk around just their orange robes, who, you know, really don't do much, I guess. Are not driven by their ego, are not driven by buying a flash new car, buying a big new house. So monks, I guess, at the one end of the spectrum are at 1, you know, on the graph. They're at number 1. And then we all kind of veer up that graph. We all kind of head in a direction, upwardly direction. And hopefully we don't get to the top, which will cause grief, anxieties, all kinds of issues. But we're somewhere. We're all kind of driven slightly by our egos. It's an emotional response. It's an emotional thing. You know, you want to buy your car, not because it gets from A to B, but because it's got some prestige, and therefore it's ego. We see people, we say, God, he's got a massive ego because he's being pushed into, not being pushed into anything, but he thinks he's better than he is. You know, he's writing out checks that he can't actually cash, or she can't actually cash. So ego is something we need to watch for. And I don't believe at the top end ego decisions made by our ego or by us, our self-importance, our self-worth, decisions that we make are any good. I think they're bad. I think they don't bring into account other people's perspective, other people's ideas. And it must be a nightmare being with people who have massive, massive egos. And I think that we need to be something we need to be aware of. You know, when we're in conversation with people, do we want to win that conversation? Are we that keen? Is it our ego that's pushing us into that conflict? And that perhaps we need to be sitting back and, you know, counting to 10 before we let our ego run away with us, and we start to become a complete and utter pain in the bum. So ego, yeah, on one side, we need a bit of ego. We need to have that. We need to have that push. We need to have that self-awareness. You know, you can't say I'm having a bath or I'm having a shower today because it's my ego. I have a self-awareness that perhaps I smell and perhaps I need to wash. And maybe that does mean that ego's driving us a little bit to have a wash. But then that's not a bad thing, is it? You know, it's not a bad thing at all. But at the extreme, we want to have a wash in a gold-plated bathroom where only the gold taps, and we've got this special water that's flown in from somewhere that makes us look more beautiful than perhaps we are not. But so ego is something we need to have in control. And ego is part of the spiritual thing as well. If you read spiritual books, ego is talked about a lot. And I think ego crosses with the idea of judgment, non-judgment. It's all part of the same nut. I think Kamala Harris, you know, the Vice President of the United States, talks about these Venn diagrams where these 3 circles and there's a section that always crosses in. I think spirituality is a bit like that, where ego comes in and there's a crossover of different ideas and different thoughts. So that's my take on ego. It's something that we need to watch. It's something we need to be aware of, and something that perhaps we need to tame. But carefully, because we don't want to destroy our own self-esteem, our own idea of self-worth, because that's important. And maybe that's something we'll look at as an individual subject, self-worth, self-esteem. But check your ego. Don't get too carried away with yourself. Think about Liz Truss and think about other people in our lives where we can see they're being ego-driven. The guy, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, buying that flash car is a bad thing. I'm saying that sometimes we find ourselves being driven to do that. We find ourselves being driven to buy that flash car because we want people to think how important we are. And perhaps that's not a good reason to do it. But anyway, I'll leave you with that, and we'll talk again soon.